Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to my channel. So, today's video is going to be a deep dive into classroom management. So, we're going to explore the many aspects of what it takes to manage a classroom. So, this video is intended for my new teacher cohort mentorship group. But of course, anybody is welcome to watch this video if you think this topic might be of interest or use to you. So let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with today's presentation. All right, just for fun, we're going to do a brief mood check-in, and this is a check-in that your students might really enjoy too. So this is really fun for students, and then it's also a good way for you to gauge how the students are feeling. Maybe you might need to check in with somebody who's kind of showing that they're stressed or that they're feeling down in some way. So I'm going to go ahead and do my mood check-in. This is me right now because I keep on messing up this video and having to take retake after retake, so I'm feeling a little bit like I want to scream, but I'm sure this take is going to be the one, and we're just going to be smooth sailing from here. All right, so here's our agenda. We're not going to worry too much about this if you are watching the video. One thing I will ask you to do is to complete the Google form that's in our classroom. If you are in my mentorship group, if you're just watching this because you're interested in classroom management, then just ignore whatever this is. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to discuss is what classroom management is. So a lot of people think that you're either a good classroom manager or you're not a good classroom manager. And with that comes the notion that people who are like, have a very strong personality or who like have a loud voice or, just have like an authoritarian demeanor, we think of those people as like having good classroom management. Right. We think of the kids, they are quiet when this teacher is around, like they have a domineering presence. And yes, we know that some teachers are like that, but that's not all of us, right? And classroom management for us is, we're not trying to invoke fear. We're not trying to control. What we're trying to do is we're trying to set the um, expectations for learning and to create the conditions for learning, right? So here are some just bullet points here. Management is about creating conditions for learning, not control. Establish connections. Start small. So we're going to kind of explore a way that you can establish a connection in the next slide. Set clear expectations for behavior. So if you're doing an activity where students are to be working in groups, make sure students know exactly what it is that they are supposed to do, what the boundaries are, what the expectations are. Are they supposed to be just conversing with the people at their desks? Are they allowed to walk around the room? What happens if they need help? Those are all things that you're going to need to set expectations for. Be consistent. So, students are going to need to internalize the expectations. So, being consistent is the easiest way to do that. And then finally, and I think most importantly, keep students engaged. If students are engaged in learning, then they're really not going to have the opportunity to engage in challenging behavior. Most of the time, I would say the vast majority of the time, when there are behavioral challenges, it's usually because the procedures or routines are not clear and students don't know what to do, or they are not engaged in whatever learning activity is given to them. And with the disengagement comes acting out. So relationships are crucial for building that rapport with students, right? When you're correcting behavior, to avoid a power struggle, you're really going to want to have rapport and a good relationship with that student. Students cooperate more when they feel respected and known. greet students, learn names quickly, show genuine interest, and consistency and fairness build trust. So here's a resource that you might find helpful. So I always begin my lessons with a question of the day, and this is a way to start small with creating those relationships with students. So this is a would you rather Wednesday question. So just really simple. Would you rather have a pet lizard or a pet snake, and why? So there's a few ways that you could have students share this out. They can talk with the people at their table. They can raise their hand and share that way. Um, it just really depends on what your style is in the classroom. What I like to do is I like to have the students discuss in groups and then I circulate among the tables to kind of hear what students are saying and to make sure that they're like on task and, having a discussion. And let's say you have students who are shy and really prefer not to share orally. You can always have this option on Nearpod. They can make their opinion known virtually. All right. So, rules, routines, and procedures. The recommendation is if you're going to set classroom rules, um, to have 3 to 5 rules max. And these should be positive statements, what students should do, rather than what students should not do. I'm going to be really honest and say that I'm not really a rules person. I'm more of a norms and procedures kind of teacher. So, what I do is I make sure that students know exactly what to do when they do a certain activity. And so that way, if there's any deviations from what they're supposed to do, I can say, okay, so during this activity, we're supposed to be in our seats. Like we're supposed to, use a level 1 voice. I'm able to correct the student's behavior using language from the procedures. I'm also a big fan of norms. So things like having a growth mindset, um, asking students for help before the teacher, things like that. So with routines, these are things like passing out materials, lining up, transitioning. Um, Make sure that you're teaching, modeling, and practicing these routines. And with consistency, these turn into habits, and that is going to be extremely beneficial for you, right? When you're not worrying about, oh, the students don't know how to line up. Oh, the students are like, going crazy when they run out of notebook paper or whatever, or they are talking out of turn all the time. As soon as the procedures for turn taking in class, borrowing supplies, lining up, as soon as things like that are taken care of, then you can focus on what you are really here for with it, which is teaching, right? We want those things to become habitual. So that way, you as a teacher and them as the students aren't like wasting mental space on like, oh, well, we don't know how to line up, or, the students are talking over each other all the time, right? All right. So there's 2 ways to address behavior in the classroom. One way is to be reactive, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If like a student throws a chair in the classroom and you don't react to that, then that's a problem, right? The appropriate reaction would be to, make sure that the other students are safe, to clear the classroom, to make sure that security is called, et cetera, right? Sometimes we do have to be reactive, but it's a lot better to be proactive. So with most behaviors, you're going to want to be proactive about addressing them. So things like students being like overly social in class, right? Strategic seating is a way to kind of nip that in the bud, right? We don't want mortal enemies sitting with each other, right? But we don't want BFF forevers sitting next to each other either, right? Um, Also making sure that students are engaged in learning, right? So if students are engaged, if they're focused on something, then they're really not going to have the opportunity to really engage in these challenging behaviors. They're not going to have the mental bandwidth to be disruptive or to be challenging, etc. Um, Another way to be proactive about behavior is to use positive framing, right? So if the expectation is that, the tables are supposed to be quiet before the students line up, rather than be like, oh, the turquoise table is like, they keep talking, like, what's wrong with you people at the turquoise table, right? Instead of being like that, you could be like, oh, I see the green table is, being very quiet and they're ready to go. The green table can line up and so on and so forth. And then you'll be amazed at, how many kids are going to be like really quiet and still and, because they want to line up first. It'll end up being like a competition. All right. So what happens when you do have to address a student's behavior? You want to be as tactful as possible in these situations. So when addressing a student's behavior, make sure that you're addressing the behavior and not making it about the student. So if the student is engaging in off-task behaviors, like let's say they're playing video games while you're teaching and they're really not doing their work, you can say, instead of saying like, oh, Johnny, you're never doing your work, like, you were so unproductive today. Just notice, or just say something like, I noticed that instead of working with your group, you were playing a video game. Try to be as objective and not like personal as possible. Also, try to be private when redirecting if possible. I know that's not always possible. Sometimes you're the only teacher in the room and things happen in the moment. But a lot of us diverse learners teachers, we're fortunate enough to have a co-teacher. So that would be a good opportunity to, pull the kid in the hallway and have a conversation without the audience of the other students in the class. When it comes to escalation, that should be done gradually and consistently, right? We don't want to escalate some behaviors and not others. Like if we get the dean involved with some behaviors and not others, that kind of creates a environment of unfairness and inequity. So you just want to be as consistent as possible when escalating. And then what's really important is after the behavior is addressed, especially if it is escalated where there is a negative consequence, to be restorative, right? To talk to the student, really understand where they're coming from, so that way there's no, or, to really mitigate any harm to your relationship with that student. All right. So it's very important to have smooth transitions when in classrooms. You don't want to, take too long with passing out materials. You don't want to take too long, like, figuring out what the next part of your lesson is. Um, because if there are any gaps in your instruction, especially when it seems unclear what students are supposed to do, then there's going to be some off-task behavior, and with that comes those behavioral challenges. So, um, use consistent attention signals when starting class, when transitioning. As far as materials, I would ensure that everything is ready to go, printed beforehand, um, and then enlist students' help with this, right? Like hire a paper pass router or whatever, paper passer. Um, Students do really well with jobs and they take their jobs really seriously if that's something that you're consistent with. And then it makes things run a lot smoother if students are helping out with things like distributing papers.